first of all, you come in and you're like, okay, this is going up, number go up technology. This is going to be brilliant. This is going to be $50,000 in about 6 months' time. What's the highest? $68.5, $69,000. Well, if we go back there, then I can sell out and I've got all of these dollars. No one thinks that way in our space. We're here for the money. We want the money. Bitcoin is the money. We don't want the fiat currency. Even when it's $300,000 per Bitcoin, doesn't matter. We don't want to give up the money for the currency because we understand the complete difference. It's easy to look back in hindsight and say, look, just 6 months ago, whenever it was 60,000. Now it's 22,000. You're crazy. You've made a bad decision. We're not looking 6 months. We're looking eternity.
Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. In this episode, I spoke with Daniel Prince, who is a Bitcoiner, an author, and the host of the Once Bitten podcast. So Prince has a really interesting story about working in the finance industry and really kind of doing the whole 9-to-5 grind, and then having a time in his life where he went on a different path and decided to go traveling with his family, homeschool the kids, and really live much more of a independent and kind of sovereign life. And I think this is something which really appeals to a lot of people, and especially now that people are losing trust and faith in the traditional institutions, I think this really just highlights that it is possible to live a different kind of life. So we also talk about Bitcoin, of course, and how that can be used as a tool to further self-sovereignty. But I tried to approach Bitcoin in this episode in a way that was answering a lot of the questions that I've heard people asking recently, especially people who don't have Bitcoin or are new to Bitcoin, because I know there's a lot of skepticism out there and not everyone listening to this podcast is a Bitcoiner or really believes and has faith in Bitcoin. So I did try to answer some of those questions myself and also give Princey the opportunity to answer some of those questions as well, because I think ultimately we all agree that people need to become more self-sovereign and they need to take more power away from governments that have become too centralized and too powerful and too influential over people's lives. But I recognize that a lot of people don't think that Bitcoin has a part to play in that, or don't believe that it's an important part, and I really think it's crucial. So we definitely tried to tackle some of those main criticisms, ones which I've certainly been hearing recently. So I hope that this does help to answer some of the questions that people might have who are still Bitcoin skeptics. I'm thinking in my next Bitcoin themed episode to have the entire conversation purely around fielding some of these really key questions that people have who are skeptical about Bitcoin. So maybe do an entire hour or hour and a half long conversation where it's just purely going through those key criticisms and explaining why Bitcoin is useful, and also in particular why it's not a tool for the cabal or not a tool for people to own nothing and be happy, because I really think that it's the absolute antithesis of that idea. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the episode. If you enjoy it, please give it a share on social media. As I said in the last episode, my account has been severely throttled and I really struggle to get any reach on my tweets these days. So anything you can do to share the episode out will be hugely appreciated. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please give it a 5-star review in whichever podcast app you're listening on. And if you're new to the podcast, please give it a subscribe. I'm sure there will be a lot of conversations previous to this one and coming up in future episodes that will interest you. Final thing is there are now 2 ways you can support the show. The first is via Bitcoin Tips on the Twitter page. If you just click on the tip icon, then that will allow you to give a Bitcoin donation. And also, if you click the link in the bio for Staying Free Pod, then there's a new link there for Buy Me a Coffee, which will allow you to give a small donation. And of course, all donations are really appreciated. There are costs involved with running this podcast, and any donations will really help towards paying those costs. All right, that's enough for the intro. Let's get into the episode. I am a fan of your podcast. It was one of the podcasts which got me into maximalism. It was probably yours and John Ballas's podcast that were the 2 that pulled me over to the maxi side. So thanks for that.
Oh, great to hear. And what, yeah, it's nice to know that John and I are having an effect on some people. John's a great friend. He was very instrumental in my own journey, listening to his podcast and some others before me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was a great podcast for me to learn from, and shout out to the other guys as well. You know, Brady, before Brady was at Swan, he was doing his own Citizen Bitcoin podcast, and I would listen to that as much as I could. Stefan obviously still has his thing going. Peter with What Bitcoin Did. They were the 4 that I would really kind of I remember the days where you'd be like standing on hot coals waiting for the next Bitcoin podcast episode to drop. Like there just wasn't enough content. I couldn't get enough. Part of the reason that I started thinking to myself, not that I thought there was a niche in the market or anything like that. It's just I had this message and how could I share it? And should I start a podcast? And that's kind of where all of that thought process started leading me down the road to, yes, you should.
Yeah. I was thinking about doing a Bitcoin podcast. I mean, this all kind of started when I had a Telegram group where I was just talking about Bitcoin and just doing monologues about it. And someone suggested in that Telegram group that maybe I actually turn it into a podcast. That was Ollie. So shout out to Ollie if he's listening. And so I was thinking about doing a Bitcoin podcast, but there is a lot of stuff out there now. Like you said, I mean, back in the day when I first started getting into Bitcoin content, it was really listening to, I don't even remember the World Crypto Network. It was with Vortex and Mad Bitcoins. I mean, these guys just are not really big anymore, but this was like 2016 and they were pretty kind of bootleg kind of conversations. That was all it was, just on YouTube. But yeah, I kind of fell away from listening to stuff for a little while and then kind of got back in and around 2019, 2020 to Bitcoin only podcasts. And then, I kind of went back down the rabbit hole, essentially. I think that bear market, I just took a bit of space from it because it was quite brutal. But yeah, and then obviously started this, but I decided not to make it a Bitcoin podcast in the end, just because one, there's a lot of people doing great stuff in that area already. And two, I kind of wanted to, my vision for this was to kind of marry the freedom movement that's going on around the world and marry that with the Bitcoin movement. So, I want to obviously have conversations about Bitcoin, which is, this being one of them. But I also kind of didn't want to exclude conversations and content that would interest people who aren't necessarily Bitcoiners, who haven't kind of started that journey, even though I think that they will come to it in the end.
Mm-hmm. They will come to it.
Yeah, for sure. So my audience generally is mostly not Bitcoiners, but I try to have these conversations and try to kind of marry those ideas that are kind of floating around between people in the freedom community and Bitcoiners, because I genuinely think there's so much overlap there and people just don't necessarily know it yet. So I want to start by going into some of your history, because I have heard you talk about it a little bit on your podcast, but my listeners won't necessarily know your background. So do you mind just telling us a bit of background as to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Starting from where, I suppose. Born and raised, a young Essex lad on the southeast of England. Did the whole usual thing, went to the local primary school, went to local state secondary school, did the A-level thing, couldn't stand academia anymore, and managed to find myself a job rather than try and force myself into university. And I started working in foreign exchange markets in London by virtue of the fact that my father was in the banking industry. He worked in foreign exchange sales. So his network was all of that kind of network. I did not end up in banking, but I ended up on the brokerage side of foreign exchange markets, where you just are literally putting buyers and sellers together. And I walked into the dollar mark spot desk. The spot just means you do the trade right there and then, whereas a future markets, you're trading to a future date, a future contract. And that was crazy. That was when we still had Deutschmarks. This was the mid-90s. We still had French francs. We still had Italian lira. We still had Spanish peseta. And I had never given money a second thought. It's something you earned. And of course, I knew different countries had different currencies, and because we'd been on holiday and whatever else. But I didn't realize that there was this whole world out there that was trading these contracts, in tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, a clip every second of every day. It was intoxicating. I was incentivized by the money and wanted to. I started obviously seeing the lives that some of these traders and brokers were leading, and they were very well paid. And that was my incentive to stay in that business and to try and carve a career out of it, which I did. So I had 18 years in foreign exchange markets. I moved into options markets after the spot markets were downsized because of, one, we had the euro. So all of those markets were just completely obliterated. So you had lots of people vying for positions. And then all of a sudden you had electronic broking system came out, which was basically a little voice box robot doing exactly what a human being was doing. So I saw AI up close in the late 90s as well, and how that can have effect on people's livelihoods. But I managed to get my seat at a foreign exchange options desk, and in '99 I got the opportunity to go out to Singapore, and that's where I realized this is the best place to really start building a career, because there was very little competition out there. Very few people wanted to leave London or New York because they were the glory financial centers of the world. So I got an opportunity, and 15 years later, I was still there. And my wife and I, she was from Essex as well. She moved over with me. My wife and I, we had 4 kids by this stage. And it got to the age of 37, I was. And I was like, I'm just done with this. I cannot do this anymore. This is not fun. It was not a burnout. It was not even a midlife crisis. What I would class it as is a realization that I am not spending my time wisely enough. And it was, I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And it was that book that started turning my head upside down and my whole world view. And he coins the phrase, you're living a deferred lifestyle. And that really hit home with me, because I knew I was. And I wasn't seeing my kids. Not even my wife was seeing my kids, really, because she was just shuttling them around from school to event to sport thing to party. And we were just on the treadmill like everybody else. And I just wanted off the treadmill. And so that started this journey into how on earth do you do that? How do you pull the plug on that? And this is well before I'd even really fallen down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And what would that look like? And is it even possible? Are other people doing it? How do you raise a family in such a fashion? Surely you need to have your kids in school. Is there a parallel system to that? And so all of these questions just started coming up. And for many of us, you stare at that wall of questions and you have no answer, and you shrug your shoulder and you say, oh, well, life's a bitch. Then you die. So you just get up the next morning and carry on doing what you're doing. And this is what we've been collectively led to believe to be true. And it's really it's created the society that we have today, which I think everybody would agree it's a pretty depressed, angry society, which nobody really understands why they're so angry and why they have to work so hard and why at the end of the month they've still got nothing, and what's the fucking point at the end of the day. Especially those people that have painted themselves into a career, into a corner that they can't escape, or they feel they can't escape. And it just breeds a lot of depression. It's sad to see, but the answers are out there and it is achievable, but it is down to you, the individual, to go make that thing happen.
Okay. I want to come back to the 4-hour work week aspect of this. But I guess, if you're able to just go into where that changed for you and how you came to Bitcoin, because I guess the 4-hour work week, it doesn't really go into, in my view, the kind of root causes of all of these things. It is a good guide on how to readjust your life, and definitely inspires a lot of people to change how they work and how they approach life, etc. But it doesn't get to the core of the corruption. So I guess we're going to need to kind of touch on that subject. So where does Bitcoin come into this whole story for you?
The money's broken. That's what it is, folks. That's the punchline. That's the killer takeaway from, I left March 2014 is when I walked away. Last day I ever sat in an office. And ever since then, just 8 years of introspection, deep dives, reading, listening to podcasts, figuring out, trying to piece all of this puzzle together. And that is what ultimately led me to Bitcoin. And now even every day, a new epiphany. But the core fact is, and this is still something Tim misses because he's not done the work yet on Bitcoin. He thinks he's done the work on crypto in air quotes. He's had some very high profile people on the podcast, including Naval and including Nick Szabo, which was an incredible episode. Go back and listen to it. But they do a lot of chat still about Ethereum and smart contracts and whatever else, which is still getting a lot of people in a lot of trouble. So the money's broken. How did that happen? And what does that mean? That there's two fundamental things to understand. There's a difference between money and currency. You'd think that I would have known that a long time ago, having spent 18 years working with currencies. But no, I didn't, because it's very difficult to understand something truly when your salary depends on it. And my salary depended on me turning up to sit down at a desk by 6:30 a.m. just to repeat and parrot numbers and get paid well for doing that, and being a very efficient and effective execution broker. It didn't ever want me to understand how money come to be or currencies come to be. It didn't ever want me to understand this term fiat, that we call it now, fiat currency, and what this truly means. So for your listeners, so let's look at money. What is money? Money is a medium of exchange. That's about as basic as it gets. But that medium of exchange should be agreed upon by the people within the economic framework. It should be naturally agreed upon, and this is why we have such medium of exchanges throughout history. Go back, read Nick Szabo's Shelling Out. He talks about the seashells being used as a medium of exchange. That medium of exchange was agreed upon by that group of people that were expressing value to each other within that specific economy. And then when people come along, such as European settlers, and figure out that this medium of exchange is easy for them to get the seashells because they have boats and they have fishing nets and they can use trawling tactics to get all of the shells that they need, which inflates the currency. It breaks the money. So that money was broken. And those people that were dependent on that money just got relegated into slavery, basically. The same thing happened with the agri-beads in Africa, which Robert Breedlove writes about brilliantly in his article, Masters of Slaves and Money.
Yeah.
And what we have nowadays is fiat currency. Money for us, as we would know it, we've never known money. Money was gold. That was what was globally agreed upon throughout thousands of years of human evolution, that money was gold. That was the most incorruptible element that you could store value in across space and time. I was born in 76, after 1971, which was when Richard Nixon completely closed like this idea of money being backed by gold or currencies being backed by gold. So what we have today are fiat currencies. Fiat is a Latin word which means by decree or by order of, and it is by order of your government, your state of choice, that you have to use the currency they choose for you to use as a medium of exchange in our everyday economic activities. And that fiat currency by design is made to inflate away our savings. So we are forever repressed and forever kept exactly where we are needed to be as a proletariat class, or whatever you want to call it, if you're into Orwell. Now, that's what I mean about like when the money is broken, making an economic decision is almost impossible because you do not get the clear signals from the other people, the other participants in the marketplace. It's all noise. We have no idea what the true value of something is because our currency supply is being manipulated all of the time. That's what quantitative easing has been since 2008. You just flood the system. They've flooded the system with seashells, if you want to call it that, as that analogy, or with agri-beads, but instead they're using US dollars or they're using pounds in the case of the UK listeners. And you've probably seen that Rishi Sunak, he comes on television every now and then and says, we have just printed an extra 150 billion pounds into the economy to spur the market and to spur the real estate market and to make people feel good about themselves and nobody's going to go poor. Whereas he's doing the exact same opposite. He's making people poorer because that money is coming into the existing currency base and it's devaluing the purchasing power of the tokens that we've already worked hard enough in the past to hold. So you have this inflationary fiat currency that is designed by design to lose its purchasing power over time. Or you have Bitcoin, which is the complete opposite set of rules to that. So that's what I mean about the money is broken. And when you have broken money is so important to our species. We're the only species. This is what sets our species apart from anything else on the planet. This idea of having a medium of exchange to express value. And if that's fucked, we're fucked. And that's why everyone is so angry and depressed and can't figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of what you say. I mean, it's just basically a lot of people, they don't have a place to they don't have a target for that anger. They know something's wrong. They know that the system is corrupt, but they kind of look at all of these things and, they'll say, oh, well, it's the WEF's fault, or it's the WHO, or it's this, or it's the Democrats, or it's, Trump, or whoever people blame. But ultimately, below all of it, there is this foundational layer which is corrupted, which is the money. And I agree with everything that you're saying about, in terms of inflating the monetary supply will make people poorer. But it actually goes a level more evil than that, because what this has actually done is they have inflated the value of money so much now that the only way that people have been able to get any yield is to put all of their money into investments. In particular, for instance, pension funds. There's no way you're going to get any return on a pension fund unless it's invested in the stock market. Now, the stock market has been inflated through this kind of fiat paradigm, and now everyone's sitting on these pension funds which are tanking in value because they've now decided to ratchet up the interest rates. So now what you've got is it's going the other way. Just when they've got everyone hooked on these investments in order to get some kind of yield, now they ratchet it up. They ratchet up the interest rates, and they stop printing money. At least they have temporarily. I'm sure it will resume for various reasons. But right now, it's now crashing the markets, and everyone's getting even more poor because they've got out of the cash in order to get into these risky investments, essentially, that were not risky when the money is totally free flowing and ubiquitous, and the market's just being flooded. And now they're in a position where those investments are turning red. So it's like you can't escape, right? And this is why I think Bitcoin is so important and why it has to be taken very, very seriously. And I don't think that people in the kind of freedom community outside of what is essentially quite a close-knit Bitcoin community are taking this as seriously as they should, because what I think they're not recognizing is they're looking at Bitcoin as an investment like anything else. Like, oh yeah, Bitcoin's going to go up because they're printing money, etc. It's like, no. Bitcoin is the alternative to that entire system. It's not an investment. It's not based on anything. It's not a company which has to succeed in order for you to keep value. The system just has to keep going. People just have to continue to believe in it, continue to kind of not even necessarily invest in it, but just hold that value. Just hold that value yourself. Take sovereignty over your wealth. That's all that is required. The system just needs to continue to perpetuate. It's not like it has to do anything more. It's not a company that has to make some huge profits. And this is where Bitcoin is different fundamentally from all of the shitcoins. Essentially, that's what they're trying to do. Bitcoin just needs to continue, and as it continues, we escape this paradigm altogether. And we have the first opportunity in the whole of human history to escape this. Because I know a lot of people who I talk to regularly on Twitter and stuff. They will say things like, "Oh, well, Bitcoin doesn't have real value. Gold is real money, etc." Now, gold got us where we are today. If gold was useful as money, we would be trading in gold coins. And people don't seem to address this point that gold has been a predeterminate factor in the fiat paradigm itself because it has fundamental drawbacks that it's not purposed for global money. Bitcoin fixes those issues. So yeah, I'll stop my own rant on that, but just I guess to kind of turn that into a question is, how do you address people? Because I know that I'm going to have people listening to this who they just think that Bitcoin it has no value, that it's got an imagined value, and I get this all the time that people say, "Oh, Bitcoin is the ultimate, you'll own nothing and be happy." I get this all the time. That's like the new thing that's triggering me, that Bitcoin has no value. It's own nothing and be happy because it's non-tangible. It's not a real thing. It's all just numbers on a screen, etc. How do you respond to that? Hopefully you can improve on my on my rant here and give maybe a bit more of an articulated answer on it.
Yeah. So to improve on your rant, what is happening? People are being forced into making investments, which, that is sick. Like that really, they're being forced into the casino, basically, because if their money would just hold its purchasing power, just at the very least, just hold its purchasing power, you wouldn't have to do that. You wouldn't have to spend 50 hours a week doing your 9 to 5, and then at the weekend or in your spare time or in your lunchtime, researching different stocks to pick and, try and enter the casino. And even then, even if you do make some kind of profit, so you're forced into risking that money that you've made for yourself by expending your time and your energy, then you're putting it at risk. Only the stuff that you can afford to put to risk, I hope. God, please, no one ever do margin trading or leverage to enter into any asset, including Bitcoin. So these people are being forced into making these investment decisions. So even if they win on these, in air quotes, and you sell out at a profit, you're then taxed on that for capital gains. So it's really, really sick. And another way to look at it is, so it comes back to money and currency again. When you're investing into stocks and shares, as a basic example, you're always thinking, I want this to go up, so in future I have more pounds. So in 2 or 3 years' time, I can sell out and get £10,000 extra back. But that is still just fiat money, that is fiat currency, that is going to be inflated away and by design is going to go down in purchasing power. Whereas when we talk about this in Bitcoin terms, we never look at, well, you get to a certain point. First of all, you come in and you're like, okay, this is going up. Number go up technology. This is going to be brilliant. This is going to be $50,000 in about 6 months' time. What's the highest? $68,500, $69,000. Well, if we go back there, then I can sell out and I've got all of these dollars. No one thinks that way in our space. What we're here for the money. We want the money. Bitcoin is the money. We don't want the fiat currency. Even when it's $300,000 per Bitcoin, doesn't matter. We don't want to give up the money for the currency because we understand the complete difference. And our purchasing power of our units of Bitcoin, which we call Satoshis, are always going to go up in value compared to the purchasing power of our pounds and pennies, always going to go down in value. So it's getting that straight in your mind, which obviously is a very, very hard thing to do. It took me many years to stop looking even at the price of Bitcoin compared to pounds, dollars, or whatever else. because as we have a saying in the space, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, and in 10 to 15 years time, that one Bitcoin, the purchasing power of that one Bitcoin is going to be, I mean, just astronomical. Because now, let's say only 1 to 3% of people have even invested in Bitcoin, to use that term. Out of that 1 to 3%, only about 0.5 to 1% truly value Bitcoin for what we see it is as. And that's already at a price of £25,000 or dollars. Like today, if we were to look at it, I think it's down a little bit, but it's been as high as $70,000. So that just infinitesimal amount of the global population have already valued this thing at God knows how much more than gold has ever been valued. We are so early that it's ridiculous. And if just another 5% of the globe turn up and say, right, okay, we're going to start investing into Bitcoin and we now value it as well, the price against, whether you're using dollars, whatever metric you're using, is just going to skyrocket.
Yeah.
And the more they print into the system as well, the more fiat that gets printed into the system deflates the purchasing power of that fiat against any asset that you're trying to buy, including Bitcoin. So there's two forces at work.
I agree. And I just want to be cognizant of my audience here, because the thing is, I think that we're all going to agree, you're going to agree, I'm going to agree, and the people listening are going to agree that fiat currency is trash. The difference that I see amongst the people who aren't kind of hardcore Bitcoiners is that they see, I would say, kind of three other key categories that they would put either on a par or in many cases above Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. One would be gold. The other would be shitcoins. A lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, I've got some Bitcoin, but I also want Ethereum, and I also want Cardano and XRP and all of these other nonsense coins. And then the third one would probably be the people who have gone fully black-pilled and are just like, no, all I want is tinned food, ammo, and backyard chickens, right? Like these seem to be the three things that crop up. So I think that, yeah, your point is really important about fiat money, and I think that we're all going to agree on that. So I want to try and tackle some of those other areas. So
yep.
I'll start on the gold one. I'll just give my thoughts on the gold one and kind of my response to gold. Gold, as I said before, has led us to the fiat paradigm that we have now. The problem fundamentally with gold is that it's physical. So a lot of people will say, oh, well, Bitcoin is not physical, and therefore, it has no value. Well, we had something that was physical, that was a store of value. It's called gold. And what happened? Well, because of the difficulty of moving it around, because of the difficulty to divide it, because of the difficulty to verify it. If you want to verify gold and make sure it's not, for instance, tungsten or something, you actually have to be a professional at doing that. If you want to divide it, you've got to be professional at doing that. And if you want to transport it, then you need third parties. If you want to store it, generally you're going to need third parties. And even if you decide to store it yourself, the government can knock on your door and they can take it from you. Now, Bitcoin's intangibility is a benefit, not a downside. This is what a lot of people, I think, have failed to recognize in the kind of freedom community, who just think, oh, well, it's digital and therefore I shouldn't pay attention to it because, obviously it's just a cabal asset of some sort. Well, no, I mean, Bitcoin has improved on the fundamental aspect of gold, which make it able to be self-custodied by the individual, right? So it's true self-sovereignty. I don't know if you have anything more on that one. I want to address all three of those that I mentioned, but unless you have anything else to add on gold before I move on.
No, I think you've summed it up very well. It's nothing to add. Nothing to add.
Okay, great. So that's gold. Now, the other ones that I mentioned, so I guess let's turn to shitcoins for a minute, and I'll call them altcoins generously momentarily. You can call them whatever you like. What is the problem with altcoins? Why is Bitcoin fundamentally different from buying Ethereum or any of these other kind of crypto assets, as people call them?
Right. Well, first of all, it's that there is no CEO or great big founder that is out there on some kind of dog and pony show trying to sell you Bitcoin. He's not got a great big marketing team behind him. It's completely decentralized. So for those that don't know the story, Bitcoin, many believe, is a discovery rather than invention, discovered by Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a pseudonymous name. Nobody actually knows this person's real name or whether it was a group of people. But he was building this on top of decades of work that come before him from other people that had already tried to solve these problems before the Bitcoin network. So this wasn't just like, a guy just sitting there, just, oh, eureka. No, he was pulling on lots of different projects that had come before him, but he just managed to piece all of those puzzles together. It's like, yes, bam, it works. And that's why we're here today. That's a one-shot deal. That's, as Michael Saylor would say, you discovered fire and you want to trade it. No, you don't. It's like the wheel. Here's a perfect example. You have the wheel that comes along in our species evolution, and now all of a sudden you can transport goods in a much easier fashion and much more efficient, much more effective. And then you get some charlatan come along and say, yo, guys, I got a new wheel. It's way better than this wheel you have over here. And you're like, well, the wheel seems pretty perfect. It's already working perfectly. It's all good. But he just no, this, and he just sells. And of course, his wheel is just a slight design on the original wheel. Maybe it's hexagonal. And sure enough, it's going to break. And it's going to leave you with absolutely nothing, because the wheel was the discovery, right? That's what Bitcoin is. And everything that's come along ever since has, what evolutions have we gone through? Blockchain technology, distributed ledger technology, all of the ICO scams, all of these different crypto ideas, DeFi. Now we've got yield farming. All of this stuff is just right, okay, let's iterate on the wheel. Now, Bitcoin is the wheel. It just sits there doing its thing. That's what it's designed to do. And it will do that for eternity, because that is what it's designed to do. And we have this issuance schedule as well. So this gets back to inflation. The inflationary nature of the monetary policy around government currency, fiat currency, where they just inflate the currency. You never know when they're going to do that. You never, ever know when they're going to do that. Whereas with Bitcoin, as it's coming into existence, obviously the Bitcoin needs to be minted into the network so people can interact with it and hold it. We know that is part of one of the fundamental rules of the network. We know the issuance schedule of Bitcoin. It's every 10 minutes at the moment. 6 1/4 Bitcoin comes onto the system, and we know the exact time and the exact date that this is going to play out, all the way up till it's scheduled to be May 2140, when the last Bitcoin is going to, or the last Satoshi is going to be mined into existence. And then we're on our own. That's it. That's the global economy. We'll all be running on a Bitcoin standard by then. I rambled a little bit. So what makes it different, right, was the original. Yeah, altcoins. So altcoins, they take what Bitcoin, they take the discovery of Bitcoin and then just put their own little bells or whistles on it, and their own little, they'll say it's too slow and ours is much faster, and they will market to that. It's classic marketing. It's classic startup kind of venture-backed behavior, which they all are, by the way. They're all startup venture-backed companies that are trying to do the next big thing. And they're backed by money that doesn't give. No, they're not. They're backed by currency that doesn't care about what we're trying to achieve with Bitcoin. It's backed by currency that is looking for an exit on its investment, because that is exactly what venture capitalists are looking for. So here's the money. Go do all the marketing. Go get everybody buying this token for whatever reason, whatever that imagined idea might be. And then we've got, we're in first. There's been a pre-mine generally. So everybody's got the tokens, the fresh tokens before they even hit the rest of the market. Get all the people to buy as many as possible. Loads of marketing, cute little animals or something to promote this thing. And then sure enough, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, however long it's going to take, those original insiders, they all dump it, they sell out, they take as many dollars on the back of it as possible and leave everybody else, the retail guys, holding the bags as this thing just falls in value and just goes away forever.
Yeah,
that's the main difference.
The pre-mine thing is just so nefarious. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, projects like Ethereum, which, I just have no idea how it's managed to even retain as much prominence as it has, because you literally need to do 5 minutes of research to realize that this thing has a pre-mine. And in my view, anything with a pre-mine, like, you don't even need to look any further. You don't even need to kind of turn to page 2 in why not to invest or to give any credibility to that shitcoin. Like, a pre-mine immediately strikes it out as a legitimate project. And that's like 98% of the projects out there have a pre-mine. Like, that, they all ultimately have some founder or some group of investors or some, organization that's been kind of, created to have the first issuance of the tokens. So, this is the thing.
Ethereum's just around still because it's a scammers marketplace. That's what Vitalik built. So everything now that comes along and says, "Oh, we're built on Ethereum," it's like, all right, okay, of course you are. Because there's no other, because you want to promote, oh, we're blockchain friendly, or we're DeFi, or we've got this DApp, or there's only one, or we're looking into Web3. Yeah, we're going to build it on the Ethereum network. I'm going to build it on the Ethereum network. So all of these scammy bastards are coming in, and this is the only thing that's given Ethereum any kind of value at all. And it's just, it's going to crumble in front of people, and it's just very dangerous.
Well, it actually is happening now, and I mean, if you're in this market long enough, if you're in this space long enough, you eventually just see these projects, they get hyped and they eventually crash. And the thing is, like, we have to always remember, like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we doing here? Ultimately, what we're doing is we're trying to take sovereignty over our wealth. And to do that, you need maximum decentralization. Anything that does not prioritize maximum decentralization is a project doomed to ultimate failure, because it doesn't address the fundamental issue at hand. And the thing with all of these other projects is, because they can't compete with Bitcoin on decentralization, they try to compete on some other factor. And any other factor which you're attempting to improve upon Bitcoin, i.e., faster transactions or whatever it might be, cheaper fees, they will fundamentally they will disrupt decentralization, or they will kind of not prioritize decentralization, or they'll allow that to be a secondary issue in order to push this other use case. And but the problem is with that approach is that when you destroy the actual thing that we're trying to do, which is take sovereignty over our own wealth, because you say, okay, well, I want faster transactions, so therefore you compromise on decentralization, and therefore at the end of it, you end up with a token which doesn't solve the problem which this whole thing was created in order to address. So I think that's important to remember, for people who get pulled in by these narratives. I've seen every narrative, even just Ethereum alone. I'm losing track of the number of narratives on this project, and ultimately every single one of them, even if you believe in them, these narratives that are kind of portrayed, they compromise on decentralization, and therefore you've just kind of you've killed the thing that you were attempting to solve, if you were ever attempting to solve it at all.
You have that central point of failure, and that central point of failure is Vitalik Buterin. And if you're holding Ethereum or anything that's held, or any other shitcoin that is that built on the Ethereum network, and you don't know who Vitalik Buterin is, just go Google and just watch a few YouTube videos, and then just wonder, do I actually want all of my wealth in this guy's hands? Because there's been some pretty impressive CEOs in our lifetime. Maybe you bought Apple stock because you believed in Steve Jobs' vision. Great. That definitely worked out. Go check out Vitalik Buterin, man. You'll probably be selling your ETH pretty soon if you've never looked into that.
Okay, so So just moving on to that last point that I mentioned, again, I am trying to keep in mind here all of the people on Bitcoin who I end up getting into arguments with about Bitcoin, and they seem much more concerned about, we should be buying, and I don't necessarily disagree with this in general, but I don't think that it's an alternative to Bitcoin. But this idea that, we should just be buying land, we should be growing our own food and keeping backyard chickens, etc., and that's the answer to all of this to get sovereign. Like, we just need to essentially kind of become more community orientated and not even rely on the internet. A lot of these people, they don't even believe that the internet necessarily is going to be around. They think that the WEF or something is going to pull a plug on the internet. Which, by the way, would basically be the end of the Great Reset if they decide to pull the plug on the internet. But that aside, how do you respond to those kind of ideas? We shouldn't be buying something digital. Everything should be physical, not even necessarily gold, but actually something you can live on.
Yeah, for sure. Your guns and ammos and your food. We got backyard chickens. Love them. They're the best. Eggs and bacon for breakfast every morning. That's brilliant. Again, it comes back to the idea of, and I want to point out to your listeners, if they're not in the Bitcoin space, but they are, there's a ton of conversation around this with Bitcoiners who are doing the exact same thing. They've bought land, they're building their own house or their own community, whether that's centered around homeschooling or whether that's centered around regenerative farming techniques. There's so much going on in the space. There's one guy living out in the Isle of Man. He bought a forest. He's harvested that forest. He's now milled that lumber into perfect, building material. And now he's making his own hand-built shepherd's huts, which he intends to, sell on to, if he can, to campsites, but perfectly campsites that are owned by Bitcoiners and sharing the vision, or to those people in the Bitcoin community who have the land and now are looking to start building out and can have the shelter before they start the bigger project. There's so much going on, and anybody that is looking to do this doesn't own Bitcoin yet. Come and have these discussions. There used to be a Meshtadel group that used to hold spaces discussions about this all of the time, and I would say if you're leaning this way, and you've got your land and you've got your shelter and you're going to grow your own food, and you're going to have your animals, and you're going to rebuild community, you are 100% aligned with what Bitcoiners are aligned with. 100%. The only thing that Bitcoiners have differed is they've just added money to that list. That's it. They've got guns as well. They've got ammo. They've got tinned foods and whatever else, but they just added money. They want money to be a part of that self-sovereign package. And money is not, as we discussed, is not a stack of fiat pounds in a vault that you keep, or fiat dollars. Money to us is Bitcoin, which we've stacked with whatever fiat currency we could afford to use, and we do hold that. This can be addressed. This physical, this idea of it not being physical, we do hold that physically on what we call a hardware wallet, and that is very transportable, very easy to hide, very easy to keep safe. And we have that linked to a 12-word passphrase or a 24-word passphrase, which many of us have remembered. And that is just an extra arrow in your quiver to take you self-sovereign. Why wouldn't you do that? I guess is the... So when I put myself in their shoes, I think it comes back to what's stopping people generally is this lack of trust in yourself to understand financial markets in air quotes, and you mistakenly batching Bitcoin in with an investment thesis or some kind of financial instrument or derivative of something that's been designed by Wall Street. Now, our financial education is dire. There is a reason for that. There is a reason you do not learn about financial markets or investment throughout schooling, they want you to feel completely in the dark when you're trying to make economic decisions. So it holds people back. And I get a lot from people. It's like, well, I don't understand finance, so I'm just never going to be able to understand Bitcoin. That's the biggest pushback I get. Oh, it's okay for you. You worked in financial markets, so you understand what they're talking about, but I don't understand. And I've never worked in financial markets. Or, I don't like anything about money. And, I just, no, so I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to lose all my money. Whereas the opposite, in fact, is true, that when you start learning about Bitcoin, which is very easy to do now because there are soft touches like this on your podcast, or there are even God knows how many books now in the space. There never used to be just 2 years ago. Articles, magazines, YouTube videos, podcasts. There's so much, and you can get up to speed so very, very quickly. And when you take away this fear that it's some kind of financial instrument, which it's not, and we view it as money that our species has discovered and is evolving onto, that's a whole new different way to start coming at this thing. And it's truly, having zero Bitcoin is far riskier in the long run than owning any. And that's what I think people have got to get comfortable with understanding.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I would just like to add to that. How are you for time, by the way?
Fine, man.
Okay, cool. So the two things that there's probably three things I'd add. But you did a really, really good job of explaining that. I love the way that you talked about, just adding money as an extra arrow to your quiver. That is great. The things that I would add to that is that, first of all, there's always going to be money. I think that, we don't want to get into this idea of imagining a world in which we're all going to go back to a barter system, that you're going to, just trade, a chicken for someone's, bag of potatoes or whatever. I mean, this is just, first of all, incredibly unrealistic, but also it goes against fundamental human nature. Like, this is just not the way that humans operate. We've always had money, like you were saying, Princey, before. We had shells at one point. When we didn't have shells, we had beads. There's always been an attempt by humans to have a form of money. Now gold was the best attempt of that, but it's not going to go away just because we say, okay, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of this thing, this thing that's digital or non-tangible. It's not going to go away. We're always going to have a need for money, and it's always going to manifest in some way. So even if we try to get rid of it, it will always be part of human nature. So we just want to try and get the best form of money that we possibly can. And, I believe, and obviously you believe as well, that Bitcoin is that thing. And the other thing is, yes, of course, people like Bill Gates and all of these kind of rich elites, yes, they want to buy up farmland and this, that, and the other. And it's easy to think, oh, well, that's what we should be doing. We should just be buying up farmland and doing what Bill Gates is doing because, there's a war on to kind of secure the food supply and all of this kind of thing. Now, ultimately, even people like Bill Gates, they are going to have to surrender themselves to a form of money. I mean, these people also have to accept something. They have to trade in something. They can't just, every time they want to buy something, just section off a bit of their farm and say, you can have a bit of my farm. They will have to default to a form of money as well. And we need to ensure that Bitcoin is that form of money. So this fight for Bitcoin as a form of money is not coming at the expense of securing our self-sovereignty or protecting ourselves against these kind of elites that want to turn us into a serf class. It's quite the opposite. What we're doing is we're ensuring there is always a mechanism for trade and a medium of exchange which we are ultimately in control of, that's fully decentralized. So I think we've covered those three areas I wanted to cover. Now, there's a few more areas I want to go, but let's first of all talk about the one that's staring us in the face, which is the price. Because I'm looking at BitBo right now. Bitcoin just went below $23,000, and there's a lot of no coiners out there on Twitter who are screaming, look how wrong you were. Bitcoin was at $68,500, and now it's at $22,500. It's dead basically. How would you respond to that?
What a perfect time to buy some Bitcoin. It's true. It's amazing how many people wanted to buy it at 60,000 and how few people want to buy it at 25,000. You know, it's human nature. So when this thing starts pumping again, well, it comes back again, doesn't it? What did I say earlier? Something just like about 1% to 3% of the world have invested any of their fiat currencies into Bitcoin, and it's still 20,000. What's gold? Like 2,000? I don't even know the price of gold.
It seems to always be at 2,000.
All right, so it's still 10 times the price of gold, and only 1% to 3% of us have even put in any kind of effort to understand what it is. That's mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing. And it's not, I mean, we've been here before. I don't know how many times you've seen these drawdowns, but I'm completely immune to them. Just because, not because I'm high and mighty or whatever else, but because I've done the work. I've been down the rabbit hole. I've felt the pain. I've lived through like the 2016, 17 crash, 18, whenever it was. Yeah, 17 was the hype cycle, and then 18 was the crash. All the way back down to $3,000. And I was happy, so happy that we went down there. And that year I stacked more Bitcoin than I ever had before. And I was, I just felt lucky, is that the word? Fortunate that I got this chance, that other people as well would get the chance to buy Bitcoin way lower than where it had ever been before. So for those people that are now like looking at it, and it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, look, just 3 months ago, 6 months ago, whenever it was 60,000. Now it's 22,000. Like, you guys you're crazy. You've made a bad decision. We're not looking 6 months. We're looking eternity. Yeah. This Bitcoin that I own and have self-custodied will be passed down through my family, through generations. You cannot do that. You can do that with gold, 100% you can. But you cannot do that with currencies. So the idea that I would ever want to sell out of my Bitcoin for fiat currencies again is kind of ludicrous to me. I will use it. I will spend it for things that we need. And as time progresses, we might want to buy some land and build a house and build a little, farm. I will use Bitcoin to make that purchase, but I won't be looking to sell it just to get back to some fiat currencies. So yeah, it's a difficult one though, because the sticker price people are so. That's what they concentrate on. That's what they concentrate on all the time. In the early days, and definitely for those people that have never bought any before. But I would just say, if you've never bought any before, buy some now. Yeah. Just a tenner.
Something that I've noticed is that, a lot of people in the kind of freedom community, a lot of people who are following me on Twitter, people who are probably listening to this podcast, they do the difficult thing. When it came to the kind of corona hysteria, they went against the grain on it. They were willing to speak out, and when it comes to other things like growing their own food, a lot of people, that's the hard thing to do. The hard thing to do is to grow your own food. The easy thing to do is just to go to the supermarket, right? Like, all of these things, they take conviction. And if you want to be more self-sovereign, you've got to be willing to go through hard times. And, the contradiction that I see here is a lot of these same people who are saying, I'll go for the difficult life over the easy life if I remain free and all this kind of stuff. But then they expect to come into this space to buy Bitcoin and to have the easiest ride in the world, and it's just going to ride all the way to 100K, and they can just live a great life. And Bitcoin tests you; it tests your character. And there have been so many of these drawdowns, and a lot of people exit the market. They exit the market and they walk out and they walk away and they say, I'm done, and they don't have the staying power, and they weren't there for the revolution. They were there for quick gains, and those people are going to get tossed out of the market. But I really want people who have those values of saying, I'm going to do the hard thing over the easier thing if it makes me more sovereign, to actually apply that same principle to Bitcoin. And I think that what a lot of it comes down to, this kind of rejection of Bitcoin within a large contingent of the kind of freedom community. I think what it comes down to is that they haven't got in already, and they essentially don't want to feel, they kind of, it's easier to say, oh, well, it's going to zero, than to accept that, maybe some people are onto something that, you should be onto as well. There's kind of a sunken cost fallacy here at play, which is, I didn't get into Bitcoin, and they see the price going up. Then they say, okay, well, I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to just hate on it because it makes me feel bad about the fact that I haven't got in on it. All these people it's a Ponzi scheme, blah, 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 and that works for a while. And then what they do is they either buy the top, or it has a big crash and they say, oh, look, I was right. It crashed, and it crashes, maybe 50% of the way down, but it's gone up by, 800%. And then they say, oh, well, look, it's crashed down. And, most of us who have been in this market for maybe 4 or 5 years, like at least one cycle, are sitting on a profit. This doesn't really affect us. We know that it's going to go up and it's going to go down, but this is what being, having a kind of low time preference approach, this is what it's about. It's about staying in the market longer and being willing to go through the times that are difficult and seeing it through. And, Bitcoin selects for those people. And, I do think that a lot of people in the freedom community have got that within them, who are, that they have that characteristic. I just wish that it was expressed more.
100%. Like freedom maxis, this is, it's built for you. It's really, it truly is. And yeah, I like your point about sticking around and, figuring out how to grow your own food. And that's trial and error, right? I'm sure people here have read many books about, getting started. I've got John Seymour's book out there. It's the Bible of the space of the self-sustainable, plant my own vegetables every year. Then a hailstorm comes along and just wipes me out, and I've got absolutely zero to show for my efforts. It's the same thing as Bitcoin probably going down a little bit, but you keep coming back. The shit I've learned about keeping chickens, the shit you learn about how you can hand pollinate courgette plants or pumpkin plants, right? This is stuff you learn, and stuff that you pick up by trial and error and figure out, and by entering into community of people that are doing this and getting your biodiverse grains and learning about perennials and where to plant certain crops and where not to, and how to pair all of this kind of stuff together. Huge knowledge. Learning about Bitcoin is just an extension of that, and it's addictive once you start to learn about it, and everything else starts to unfold. To take us all the way back to the beginning, when you realize that the money is broken and that Bitcoin can start and communities can really start reorganizing around Bitcoin. Perfect example in El Salvador, down in Bitcoin Beach, what they're doing down there. It's still early days, but communities can be built around this medium exchange. And it can protect you. It's going to protect you certainly from the inflationary nature of a monetary policy, and it's going to be there for you forever, as long as you self-custody it and learn how to do that. But again, doesn't take a technical genius to figure it all out.
Yeah, great point. Just finally, then, I want to talk a little bit. Just about how you're living your life now, because obviously we got your life story up until the point of living in Singapore and then kind of realizing that you wanted to change. I know now you're living in France, and you're living a very different lifestyle. So I'm hoping you can just go into that a bit. Like, what does that sovereign life look like for you? Yeah,
so I'll take this one back to 2014, where I finished. That's where I'd finished reading the 4-Hour Work Week. It changed my mind upside down. Turned my mind upside down, excuse me. And we just got to thinking, like, what can we do? How can we live differently? What's what do we want to do? Actually, what do we want to do? And the idea was, well, if you're going to quit your career, what would we want to do? Well, we want to travel, because we were living in Asia at the time. And it was kind of, okay, clearly going to have to go back somewhere and get a job in financial markets at some point. But before we do that, what should we do? Let's travel with the kids and see as much of this region as we can whilst we're in this part of the world, right? Because conventional thinking was, maybe we'll just end up in England and I'll have to get a job in London and, yada, yada, yada. So that was kind of like the loose plan. We sold everything. We kept some beautiful pieces of furniture that we had acquired throughout our time living in Asia that we just wanted to keep forever, and shipped them back to the UK and stashed them away in an undisclosed location. But they're with us again now. And we started looking into what would a world look like if we took the kids out of school and started traveling with them. They were aged 8, 6, and 2 3-year-old twins. So 4 kids aged under 8. And we had no answers to that. So we had to hit the internet, find all the family blogs, find all the homeschooling information. Is this possible? Is this legal? Because at that point, I'd just been Mr. Blue Pill Normie. It was going to be try and get your kids through the best education possible. Don't question the system. Believe in the teachers. Believe in the process. Put your head down and just grind this out until you're 70, and then maybe you can retire. So when we realized that there's a bunch of families out there doing this already, that they'd taken their kids out of school and they were traveling the world, that gave us the confidence, and we connected with some. You can do that easily. Facebook groups, Telegram groups nowadays, but back in those days, back in 2014, it was all just on Facebook. We got the confidence to go for it. So we also fell into a home swapping community because, having lived in Asia for 15 years, we had already bought a property with a little bit of land in Thailand, which we thought we would use as holiday destinations as we were building a family, and just to have in the family forever, basically, to pass down to our kids. And of course, prices then were much lower to buy property than anywhere else in the world. So we went there for the first 2 months. Luckily, nobody was renting at that point, and we just kind of tried to come to terms with what we had just done. It was the first kind of overriding emotion. It's like, holy shit, what have we just done? And freedom hadn't even kicked into me yet. That the monkey mind is so overpowering that first 2 weeks, you think your monkey mind just thinks you're on a family holiday. It's cool. It can handle that. But any time after that, all of a sudden it kicks in like, what the hell have you just done? You're unemployed. You're probably unemployable because of the stupid decision that you've made, and no manager or anybody else is ever going to take you seriously again. You've got 4 kids outside of an education system. You're going to ruin their lives, and you're going to put your wife through, hell. So that kicks in. And then you've got to face down those demons. And that's when you start doing a lot of soul searching. And then we were still committed to making this trip happen, making this thing work. Like, that's what we decided to do. That's what we budgeted for. So I'd found this idea of home swapping. So we started reaching out to other people on this website. We found lovehomeswap.com, and I called up the CEO and I had a chat with her, and she's like, yeah, list your property and, let's see how it goes, because it was a new startup. And sure enough, we started getting approached from people all around the world. And we're like, okay, well, that's the accommodation part solved. We could now start traveling and building an itinerary around free accommodation and being dropped straight into a community, which the homeowner was more than happy to introduce you to the neighbors, tell you where the local amenities were, the local tourist sites, the local, shops and, best restaurants and parks and museums and whatever, depending on whatever you were, wherever you were visiting. And all of a sudden, 6 months just rushes past us. And that's when the freedom maximalism started kicking in, because no one had been chasing us for anything. We were perpetual tourists. No one cared about us. There was no administrative bureaucrat trying to send us some kind of piece of paper. That the tax I owed in Singapore was on, it was all digitally handled. And those liabilities were all fine and accounted for. It was nothing. We didn't have school reports. We didn't have school meetings. We didn't have ballet lessons. We didn't have this lesson. It was just us. And it was bliss. And it was the most amazing feeling I think any of us could have ever felt, because you knew each day that you woke up, whatever you were going to do that day was on your time, on your decision, on your research, on your back, and nobody could stop what you were, planning to do. And it was truly, truly amazing. And then you start going through a different formation where, like a lot of people call it ego death. I was struggling with a crisis of what's the word I'm looking for here? It's escaped me.
Meaning?
Not meaning, identity. Identity.
Okay.
Because that kicks in and you're like, well, who are you? Like, who are you? Because for 18 years prior to that, I could answer you I'm a foreign exchange broker. Now, it's a classic Zoolander 2, where they're calling across the rooftops at each other. I don't know if you've ever seen the film. Who are you? When you're all looking for, like you say, looking for meaning.
I don't remember it, but
but you are looking for meaning, and it's you do a deep dive into that, because all of a sudden you've got this identity crisis on your plate, and it wasn't just for me either; it was for my wife, because she was going through well, who am I? I'm no longer the expatriate wife that lives in Singapore with the 4 kids, and because that was her identity, and now you just got to start completely redefining who you are, and how do you do that if you've got nothing to hang your hat onto? And then it's like, well, we're a traveling family. Okay, what does that mean? What do those people do? Well, I started writing a blog right at the beginning of the trip, just to keep friends and family up to date of what we were doing and where we were. I wasn't a big fan of Facebook, so I just built my own website, learned how to do that. It was very, very easy, it turned out. I just used Weebly.com back in those days and built a little blog and kept everybody up to date. And then that blog started attracting media attention. So when we were down in Australia, we had the Times newspaper that was based out of Perth come and do an interview and take pictures. What you're doing is really amazing and very inspiring and motivating other people to think differently about life. It's like, okay, yeah, happily do that. Then two UK newspapers approached us. So we'd been in the Mirror and the Times. The Times travel section, front page of the whole pullout. They were interested in running a story about what we were doing. So all of a sudden, it's like, shit. There's people out there that want to live this life but just don't know how to, and are just looking for other families that have done it to help inspire them. And after 2.5 years, we after the initial 6 months we were supposed to go for, that turned into 2.5 years, and it's addictive once you realize that freedom part. And then I ended up writing the book, Choose Life, which was all about going through these decisions, going through these dark times, facing down these demons, and all of the different little adventures that we had on the way, which has got some amazing feedback, and I'm really happy to have met some people that have read the book and have since taken their kids out of school. And the most touching moment, we were on a beach in Spain at a world schooling meetup. There was a little town down there called La Herradera, where a lot of world schoolers just kind of congregated and started their own little community. This is what we're going to do. We're going to start our community. It's a world schooling hub. Any homeschoolers, unschoolers, whatever schoolers, alternative schoolers you want to call yourself, traveling families, come. And they would run writing lessons. They would run art lessons. They'd run swimming lessons, canoeing lessons, football lessons. You know, the fathers and the mothers would put all this together and use each other's skills. In fact, one 16-year-old girl was teaching a poetry class, and the kids loved that. And, you know, you sign up and she would earn like €2 per head sort of thing. So this is, I'm sure, what freedom maximalists are talking about when you're trying to build communities. So we were there and we were on the beach, and I was talking to one couple, and all of a sudden the lady turned around to me and said, "Oh, wait a minute. I kind of know your story. Who are you?" I said, "Oh, we are the Prince family." "Wait, yes, you wrote the book, Choose Life." And then her husband turned around like, "Wait, what? Yeah, like that's the book. Like that's the book that made me quit my job. That's the book that made me like." I'm like, "Oh shit!"
Wow, that's awesome.
Hope it's going well for you. And he said, "Well, you got to meet my daughter." So he calls the daughter over and says, "Oh, by the way, this is how." She was 13 years old. And she said, "This is Daniel and his wife, Claire." And she's like, "Oh, yes, nice to meet you." This is the thing about unschooled or homeschooled kids. They look you in the eye and shake your hand and ask you questions immediately because they're not used to them being told to sit down and shut up and don't talk and, you know, raise your hand if you want to be spoken to.
Right.
And then her father said, "Yeah, he wrote the book." And she's like, "Oh, right, yeah." And then looked at her dad and he's like, "Yeah, the book." And then she looked at me and said, "What, the book?" I said, I think so. If you're talking about Choose Life. And she's like, "Oh my God. Oh my God." She's like, "You have no idea. You have no idea. If it was not for your book, I remember the day my dad come home and he told me he'd read this book and this is going to take." I was so unhappy at school. I am living like such an amazing life and I can't, and then you realize like the power of the word, and you don't know who you're inspiring. And that just made all of the experiences that we had and all of the hard work of writing the book, so tangible. Again, right? We come back to that word, like tangible. Who'd have thought emotions were tangible until like you're faced with them right there in front of you. And it's like, wow, yeah. Stories like that can change people's lives for the better. So once, after 2.5 years, we were starting to feel travel fatigue. There was new questions were being asked about from ourselves introspectively, like we literally can't do this forever. So what is it that we are looking to achieve? And of course, for my wife and I, it was like, well, what can we give the children out of this? You know, of course, they'd had an amazing time, but if we could give them any one thing in life, what would that be? And we both agreed it would be the ability to speak another language. We settled on that. We're like, the experiences that we'd seen certainly opened up our minds, and because most people were like, they've got to be good at math or they've got to be good at certain sport. We were like, no, it's got to be another language because that opens up all kinds of different avenues in your brain. So we were staying in France at the time. We were house sitting. We'd been house sitting for 2 months, where you just look after somebody's property, again, rent free. And the kids had shown interest in learning French. We were having a lovely time. It was a beautiful summer, and we found a long-term rental. And then we kind of reversed track. We knew the best way for them to learn a language was to be immersed in it, and that meant putting them into a system again. And that was really difficult. I found that so difficult. dropping them back off at the school gates again was a tough thing to do. However, they were very, very happy to be going in and playing with some of the kids, and we knew that would be the quickest route to getting the language in them. And sure enough, after 4 years, they were all fluent, and then COVID rears its ugly head, and all of the schools are shut down, and we were both secretly so happy. And then we confided in each other, like, this is like, we cannot send them back to this. So 3 out of the 4 have never gone back. And our oldest, she's nearing 17. She's made the decision that she would like to, finish off what she'd started and get her, they call it a bac here in France. I guess it's like your GCSE or half an A-level equivalent. So she has a year left of that. And then we plan to travel again as soon as that's done, because we want to stay location independent. We have, as we've talked about on this podcast, we have a good percent of our savings now locked up in Bitcoin, and we're happy that that's safe, and that's going to see us through forever and generationally. So we don't want to pin our hat on any one country. We want to go and explore and have as many experiences as a young family as we can, because time passes you by so quickly, and time is our ultimate currency, and we have to use that as wisely as we can. And I just want to live as free as possible, and I don't want to be beholden to any systems, certainly not in France, which is overbearing with the bureaucracy and the administration. So yeah, we'll be on the move again in a year to 18 months.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for sharing all that. I've actually learned a lot there. I didn't know. I've heard kind of bits from your own podcast, but I've never kind of heard such a complete story about kind of everything that's happened since leaving Singapore. So that's so awesome. It sounds like you really, really transformed your life, and obviously that Bitcoin's played a big part in that as well, which is really great to hear. I hope you make it out to Mexico at some point. Have you got any plans to go over to North America or South America?
That's exactly what we want to do. Yes, 100%. 100%. Are we focused on Europe for the next year or so? Because finally we're getting a lot of good meetups here in Europe and conferences. And one actually that your listeners might be interested in, I'm going to be speaking at a conference in Prague in October. It's over 21st to 23rd of October, and it's called Liberty in Our Lifetime. And it's about parallel structures. It's not Bitcoin focused. It's put on by the Free Cities Foundation. I don't know if you're aware of those guys.
Yep.
So they're putting it on, and there's going to be a bunch of different speakers there, and it's going to be a really good kind of melting pot of ideas of alternative. I'll be doing a speech on alternative structure to the education system, and obviously someone's going to do the alternative structure to the financial system. I think Stefan Rivera is going to handle that on the Bitcoin side. But then it's like alternative everything. What's the alternative structure to food, to health, to medicine, to, you name it, farming, living, community building, which is what Free City Foundation is all about. Building communities within around like-minded people that want the same kind of thing out of life, rather than all of us just mold ourselves into massive cities and surrounded by people, but with zero community. It makes no sense. None at all.
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds like a really, really good event. I'm sure that a lot of people will be interested in that.
And we do want to get out to Mexico. It's like number one country on our bucket list. We want to do Central South America, because that is, we did not hit that part of the world when we were doing all of the home swapping. We never got down there. So yeah, we want to do Mexico and then hit as many of those different countries that we can. And we will definitely get to El Salvador and go and visit Bitcoin Beach and see what's going on there.
Great. Well, when you make it out to Mexico eventually, definitely give me a shout. Be great to meet up. Before we round things off, just let people know where they can find you. I know you've already mentioned your book, but just any other channels that people can find you. And then also just any kind of closing messages that you have for my listeners.
Sure. Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been great to get to know you, and I definitely want to come and visit you in Mexico. I know it's a big country, and there's a lot of Bitcoiners and freedom maximalists down there. So I hear great things about the country. If people are interested in learning more about the book, it's just Choose Life. You can find that on Amazon. It's going to be listed very soon. It's going to be live on Consensus Network, where you can head over there. You can use Bitcoin to pay for it, or normal money, currencies. But they're a great team doing great work in a freedom way. They're trying to decentralize publishing. So a lot of time for Nico and the team over there. My podcast is called Once Bitten, and you can check that out on any of the platforms. I push people to go and check out Fountain app, because they are doing great work trying to decentralize content, and they're trying, this whole podcasting 2.0 movement, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with. Fountain app is a great place to go and listen. And if you've never bought Bitcoin before, I think still, if you download that Fountain app and create your first account, I think you get 1,000 Satoshis straight away in your inbuilt wallet, which you can use to stream to podcasters whilst you're listening to their content. So it's this idea of distributed micropayments and supporting the content creators, which is going to redefine everything that we know about content consumption as well in the next 5 to 10 years. I would say that's probably it. Huge respect for what you're doing, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope we get to speak again down the line.
100%, man. Take care.
Cheers.